All right, so we are starting a series of programs that is titled Yahshua HaMashiach in the TaNaK. That's the book title, if you want to call it that. Yahshua HaMashiach in the TaNaK. Yahshua HaMashiach in the TaNaK. That's the name of the book. The first chapter that we're going to be reading through and discussing is Out of the Darkness Came the Light. That's the title for today's message, is Out of the Darkness Came the Light. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be seeing that Yahshua is all throughout the TaNaK. And the TaNaK, of course, is another name for the Old Testament. The T standing for the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. The N talking about the Nevi'im, which has to do with the prophets. And then the K standing for the Ketuvim, which has to do with the writings. So Yahshua HaMashiach in the TaNaK. And today we're talking about out of the darkness came the light. So let's start where Elohim started, the creation of the world. Was Yahshua at the creation of the world? Of course he was, because all things were created through him. So it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's in the King James Version. And I want to show that the word God in Genesis 1, verse 1 is from what's called the Hebrew number 430. And the Hebrew word is Elohim, Elohim. And it says it's a plural of H433, which is El. And so it means gods in the ordinary sense, but specifically used in the plural, thus especially with the article of the supreme God. So Elohim is talking about the supreme God. Okay, when you capitalize it especially, it's talking about the supreme God. Now I brought my glasses today because I'm surely going to need them. Now, further explanation. This is in John chapter 1 and verse 1. In John chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So there are 2 entities that make up Elohim. There are 2 entities that make up Elohim. There's not 3. There's no such thing as a Trinity. That's a false doctrine. There are 2. One that was called the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's in John 1, verse 1. Now, who is this Word talking about? You'll see in John chapter 1, and this is in, let's see if I can get that out the way. John chapter 1, verse 14. John chapter 1, verse 14. It says, the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. We just got finished celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, this is speculation, but I believe that during the Feast of Tabernacles, that's when Yahshua was born, because he came to tabernacle with us. So the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. We saw his glory, such glory as the one and only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. So now, when you come to what's called the New Testament, we have these same 2 beings, but now the Word is called the Son of the Father. And of course, the other being in the family is called the Father. So think of Elohim as a family. There's one family, one God, but there are 2 entities that make up that family. Let's say Silas and Barbara. That's one family. There's 2 entities in that family. Of course, they have reproduced, and now there are more entities in that family. And we know that Elohim is reproducing themselves through us, so that eventually we will be born again as full-fledged members of the family of Elohim. So just think about this. In the beginning, the light was there. Yahshua was there, and we know that he's the light. We're going to prove that, but we know that's true. Okay, then the next thing is it says, in the beginning, Elohim created. Well, this word created, if you look at Strong's exhaustive concordance, it is H1254, and it's the word bara. It's a primitive root meaning absolutely to create. This is the word for the original creation. Once you see the word bara, it is the original creation. There's a different word that we're going to see later when it says he made something. When he made something, that's a different word. When he creates, it's the word bara. So Elohim created. And then I have here, whoops, get that. I have here, it says in John chapter 1 and verse 3, in John chapter 1, that became flesh. So all things were created through him, and apart from him, nothing was created that has come into being. So therefore, we know that the Word, the one that became Yahshua, he was there from the beginning because he created everything in the beginning. The Father said, do this, and Yahshua did it. Okay? It's pretty simple. And then the word heaven, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but in the King James Version talks about heaven and makes it seem singular. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, but it should be heavens. And so this word heaven is H8064, Shamayim. And then there's a second word that is Shameh. So the second form, which is Shameh, of the dual words, there's two words, Shamayim and Shameh. So the second form, which is Shameh, of the dual words is of an unused singular, from an unused root meaning to be lofty, the sky as a loft. The dual words, though, the dual words, when put together, allude to the visible arch which is in the clouds, and that's where the clouds move. That's Shameh. So that's the first heavens where the clouds move, as well as to the higher ether where the celestial bodies revolve, and that's Shamayim. So there's the first heaven where we see the clouds in the sky, but then when we get past the Earth's atmosphere and we see the sun, the moon, and the stars, that's Shamayim. That's the second heavens. And we know there's a third heaven where the Father and the Word, the 24 elders, the four living creatures, the innumerable number of angels, where they all dwell. And so this word Shamayim, you can see in Shameh, is used in another place. This is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, and in verse 4. Same Hebrew word, which is H8064. And here, though, same King James Version, it says the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And then in verse 4, these are the generations of the heavens, plural, and of the earth when they were created. And that word created is the original word for created, H1254. So again, this is the original creation. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1, we're talking about the original creation, right? When the Father spoke something, and then Yahshua brought it into being. That's the original creation. But then there was a corruption that happened in the world. There was a corruption that happened in the world. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, it says, and the earth was without form and void. And so a lot of people, the majority of Christianity, they believe that when Elohim, through the word, created the heavens and the earth, that it was a mess, that it was without form and it was void. That is an error in understanding, because we're going to look at these Hebrew words and we're going to see that in Genesis 1 verse 1, it's the original creation, but in Genesis 1 verse 2, we see the corruption that is in the world. And so we see the word was is from the Hebrew Haya, which in Strong's Concordance is H1961, and it's Haya. It's a primitive root, and you can compare H1993. It means to exist, that is, to be or become or come to pass. So if we read this with that understanding, and the earth came to pass, something happened after the original creation that caused it to be without form and void. So something came to pass, or it became that way. It wasn't that way in the original creation. It became that way. It came to pass. So if we look at this in Genesis chapter 3 and verses 22 and 23. This is Genesis chapter 3. And let's see if I keep that up there. In verses 22 and 23. Yahweh Elohim said, behold, the man has become, same Hebrew word, H1963. Behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil. Therefore, Yahweh Elohim sent him forth from the Garden of Eden. So what happened? Mankind, before they took, Adam and Eve, before they took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which Yahweh Elohim told them not to do. So before that time, they didn't need to decide for themselves what was good and evil, because Yahweh Elohim said, I'm going to give you divine revelation. That was their initial state. That was the state in which they were created. They were created to have this divine revelation. But after they took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, this is where it is said, Yahweh Elohim said, behold, the man has become. It's a change of state. Now it's different. They have become as one of us, where they can determine for themselves what is good and what is evil. And of course, mankind, apart from God, has never, ever, ever been able to determine what is good, much less have the capacity to always do the good. That's why we're in the mess that we're in today. The whole world is a mess, and has been a mess ever since Adam and Eve transgressed the laws of God. So please understand that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, something happened to cause the earth to become without form and void. So what does the word without form mean? Because now we're going to show a little bit more clearly that this is a corruption. It's not the original state of the creation. Something came to pass that made it without form and void. So without form is from the Hebrew word tohu, and that's Strong's H8414. It's from an unused root meaning to lie waste, a desolation of surface, that is a desert. Figuratively, a worthless thing. Adverbally, in vain. Some translations you'll see. And the earth was in vain. It's confusion, an empty place, without form, nothing, a waste, a wilderness. Does God create in that way? No. God does not create where stuff is desolate, where it's a waste, where it's a worthless thing. He does not create in that way. The angels sang for joy when they saw the creation because it was awesome, it was beautiful, it was perfect. So let's look at this a little bit more. So it says wilderness. This one is in Isaiah. This is Isaiah chapter 45. Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 18. Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 18. Here it says, Yahweh created, and that's the original word, created, bara. Yahweh created the heavens. God himself formed the earth. He did not create the original creation, bara. He did not create it in vain. That's that same word, tohu, H8414. He did not create it in vain. He did not create it as a waste, as a worthless thing, as a wilderness, as a desert. No, when he created it perfectly. And he created it for mankind to dwell there. He formed it to be inhabited. Now let's look at the word void. In Genesis 1, verse 2, it says, and the earth became worthless, confused. It was lying waste, and it was void. So what does void mean? Void comes from the Hebrew word bohu, H9222. It's from an unused root, meaning to be empty, of vacuity, that is superficially an undistinguishable ruin. God did not create stuff that was already ruined. It became ruined. Something caused it to become ruined, and we're going to see that. So here we have more scriptures. This was in Jeremiah chapter 4. And let's see if I can get it here. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 20 and 22. And then we'll continue in Jeremiah. So Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 20 and 22. This is talking about a disastrous situation. Disaster is reported, so the whole land is ruined. Something disastrous happened, and as a result of that, the whole land, and this is talking about the land of Judah, Jeremiah prophesied to the southern tribes of Judah. The northern tribes were already taken captive, the 10 tribes. They were already taken captive by the Assyrian Empire. Now he's talking about how the Babylonian Empire is coming to desolate the land. Disasters reported. So the whole land is ruined. For why? What caused God Almighty? What caused Yahweh Elohim to say, I am going to send Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, against Judah, my people? What caused him to do that? It says, for my people are foolish. They don't know me. They are wise to do evil, but to do good they know not. Adam and Eve, when they took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they decided for themselves, I have the knowledge up here to know what is good. I can define it. I know what's evil. I'm going to do the good and I'm going to avoid the evil. No, that has never been the case. No human being, except for Yahshua, has ever been able to keep God's law perfectly, all 10 commandments in the letter and spirit of the law. So here we have the people of Judah doing the same thing, following their sister Israel, who had already been taken captive. Why? Because of their sins. Now Judah is sinning, and they are wise to do evil, but to do good they know not. This is why the disaster came upon them, because of sin. So you see these words, without form, tohu, and void, bohu, that has to do with destruction, something bad happening. And then the next verse, Jeremiah 4, verse 23. This is Jeremiah 4:23. And this one says, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form. That's the tohu. And it was also void. That's the bohu. So God put both of them together, tohu and bohu. Twins, not like our twin girls, which are beautiful. But this is tohu and bohu, destruction, desolation, and undistinguishable ruin. And notice what he says. It's very interesting, right? Because of sin, what happened? Because of sin, what happened? It says in verse 23, sorry. In verse 23, because of this tohu and bohu, because they chose to do evil and not good, because they sinned, what was the result? God says, and the heavens had no light. There used to be light, but because of the corruption of the people, darkness came in and there was no light. That's the same exact thing that happened after Genesis chapter 1 in verse 1, where things were created and it was beautiful, because that's the way Yahweh Elohim creates things. But then something happened. Sin entered into the world, and there was darkness. Everything was without form. It was void. It was a worthless thing. It was an undistinguishable ruin, and the earth had no light. So darkness entered the world. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, continuing, Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, this is the Tree of Life version. It says, now the earth was chaos and waste, and darkness was on the face of the deep. Because of sin, the light disappeared and darkness overcame the surface of the deep on the earth. Now, this word darkness, H2822, in Hebrew is chosek, chosek, chosek. Literally darkness, figuratively misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness. And we can see a few things here. This was in Ezekiel chapter 32. This is Ezekiel chapter 32, where it gives us this definition of darkness. Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 7, and it says, Pharaoh, when I put you out, I will cover the heaven and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. The sun and the moon are there, but you can't see it because God has said, I'm making an extremely thick cloud cover. I will cover the sun with a cloud. Keep that in mind. I will cover the sky with clouds, covering the sun and the moon, so you can't see it. It's there, but you can't see it. And then in verse 8, it says, all the bright lights of heaven will I make dark over you, and set darkness, the same word, chosek, set darkness upon thy land, says Yahweh. And then in verse 9, it says, I will also vex the hearts of many people when I shall bring your destruction among the nations into the countries which you have not known. So again, because of sin, in this case, the sin of Pharaoh, and this is the Pharaoh that was alive during the time when the Israelites were still in the land before the captivity happened, because Ezekiel prophesied to the northern tribes of Israel. And notice this darkness, it conveys not only that there was literally darkness, but also that there was misery, destruction, and death. Why? Because of sins. So darkness entered the world. Who sinned and brought it in? If darkness is a result of sin, then who sinned and brought in the darkness? That's the question. Well, keeping in Ezekiel, but now in Ezekiel chapter 28. Ezekiel chapter 28 and verses 13 through 16. This is Ezekiel chapter 28 and verses 13 through 16. It says, you have been in Eden, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone was your covering. The workmanship of your tambourines and flutes was prepared in you in the day that you were created. You are the anointed cherub that covers, and I have set you so. You were upon the holy mountain of Elohim. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created. You were perfect in the day that you were created. So this is a created being. It says, until iniquity was found in you. Now, what caused this iniquity to swell up? It says in verse 16, by the multitude of your merchandise, you have been filled with violence, and you have sinned. Therefore, I will cast you out as profane out of the mountain of Elohim, and I will destroy you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Who is this talking about? Let me hear you. Satan the devil. This is talking about Satan the devil, the same one that was in the Garden of Eden, the same one that used to be the anointed cherub, one that covers. He says, when iniquity was found in you, that's when I cast you out, saying you no longer belong here. You can no longer reside in the heavenly places. Further proving who sinned and brought in the darkness that came upon the world. Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 15. Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 15. How you have fallen from heaven. Why did he fall? Because God cast him out. So you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Now, Lucifer is really the word hello, like praise and bringing light. And that's why he's called son of the morning. He used to bring light. He was one of the light bringers. And what the scripture also say, that Satan and his demons, they can appear now as the angels of light, but they're really angels of darkness, because that's what they truly bring. They bring darkness because they have sinned. They're all about darkness. How have you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For you said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Well, that's what you think. But I say, yet you shall be brought down to hell. And he was. So in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 3, there was darkness over the face of the earth. We know how that darkness got there, because sin entered the world. And now we know who brought that sin. It was Satan the devil. So there was the original creation where there was light. Then darkness came because of sin. And now God is saying, okay, I've got to bring the light again. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, then Elohim said, let there be light. And because Elohim said, let there be light, what happened? There was light, because everything obeys. So now who is the light? In Psalm chapter 89, verses 8 through 15, Psalm chapter 89, verses 8 through 15, it says, Yahweh, Elohim of armies, who is a mighty one like you. Who is a mighty one like you? Yah, your faithfulness is around you. The heavens and the earth are yours, the world and its fullness. You have created them. Blessed are the people who learn to acclaim you. They walk in the light of your presence. As we open services today, what did we do? We danced in the light of his presence. We clapped our hands in the light of his presence. We played instruments in the light of his presence. And we sang in the light of his presence. We are the blessed ones who have learned to acclaim the light. So we know it's Yahweh, Elohim of armies. He is the light. And we also know that Yahweh is also Yahshua. So now think about this, and I'm going to prove this. For the first 4 days, and if we take the scripture that says 1 day with God is like 1,000 years, so for the first 4 days, which equals 4,000 years, so for the first 4,000 years, the light of the world was Yahweh. So follow me here. For the first 4 days of this really renewal of the earth, because the original creation happened in Genesis 1 and verse 1. So if anybody's thinking, the original creation of the heavens and the earth could have been 4 billion years ago. We don't know when it was, when Satan led the rebellion along with the angels that became the demons. So we don't know the exact timeline when darkness came upon the earth. But we do know that approximately 6,000 years ago, God created Adam and Eve. And he renewed the face of the earth so that they could be there, because God formed the earth to be inhabited. So when Satan destroyed a lot of stuff and brought darkness, God said, well, now I've got to renew the process. It's not an original creation starting in Genesis 1 and verse 2 or 3. This is a renewal now of the face of the earth. So when Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light, this is Yahweh coming in to existence, not created, but coming into the earth and piercing the darkness to bring light. So the 6 days of renewal. Now, I did not do this. This is actually from a guy named Clarence Larkin, who is a Seventh-day Adventist. He's long since deceased. But if you ever can get your hands on the works of Clarence Larkin, his specialty was doing graphics that help depict scripture. And this is a perfect graphic here. So the 6 days of renewal, that's what this is. And it says the first day, Genesis 1 and the 3 and 5, that's when there was cosmic light. So when it says, let there be light, there was cosmic light, but it wasn't something that you could see brightly on the earth. There was light, but because there was still so much darkness surrounding the earth, it pierced through, but it's very much like you can see on a day when it's really overcast. You know it's daytime, but it's overcast. You still can't see the sun and the moon. You know it's daytime because there's enough light to indicate that it's daytime, but the clouds are still so thick and dark where you can't see the sun and the moon, right? So the second day, God says, I'm taking some of this water and I'm going to, make the firmament of the skies. And then on the third day, he removed a lot of those clouds and he made the land to reappear. The land was already there, but he made it to appear because he separated the water, and then vegetation appears. Now, here's the real key. On the fourth day, he moved the clouds away. He moved the clouds away on the fourth day. And that's when, at that point, on the fourth day, that's when the sun and the moon appeared. It wasn't created on the fourth day. Again, that is an error in theology. It was created maybe 4 billion years ago. But 6,000 years ago, God said, I'm going to move these clouds out the way, and the sun and the moon are going to appear. Okay? They were already there, but he kind of like, if you have a curtain behind us and you open up the curtain, then you can see stuff. It's already there, but when you open up the curtain, so he opened up the curtains of the sky, and then the solar light was restored. Then the fifth day, we have the fowl and the fish, and the sixth day, the creation of animals and man. So, in Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to cover this fourth day. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. Genesis chapter 1 and verses 14 through 19. Elohim said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for appointed feasts and for days and years. And so when we celebrate the appointed feasts of Elohim, we do it based on the sun and the moon. That's Yah's calendar as it relates to the earth. Verse 15, it says, and let them give light upon the earth. Now, please catch this. Elohim made two great lights. Again, when people read that, they tend to think this is still a part of the original creation. No, the original creation was in Genesis 1, verse 1, billions of years ago. Genesis 1, verse 2, the earth is pictured as being in darkness, desolate, and waste. It could have been billions of years between Genesis 1, 1 and 1, verse 2. And we know that Satan sinned and brought darkness upon the face of the earth So then when Elohim, Yahweh Elohim, was ready to create man in his image and likeness, he said, let there be light. And there was light, but that was the cosmic light. It wasn't until the fourth day that he said, I'm going to remove the clouds and I'm going to make the sun and the moon to appear. So Elohim made two great lights. Now, is this word made, is this the original Hebrew word of bara? No, it's not. So let's see what it is. When it comes to the word made, it comes from the word asa. Asa. That's A-S-A-H. And that's in Strong's Concordance, H6213. It means to do or make in the broadest sense and widest application, to appoint something, to bring something forth, to have charge of. So when it says Elohim made two great lights, what did he make them to do? What did he say was the appointed reason for them? Why did he bring them forth out of darkness? Not create them, but make them. Why did he do that? It says to have charge of something. Well, so let's continue reading. Elohim made two great lights, Asa, the greater light, to rule the day. That's why he made it. He appointed it for that reason, to rule the day. And the lesser light, which we know is the moon, he made it to rule the night. He made the stars also. And that's the same word, made. He set them in the expanse of the sky to divide light from darkness. That was their purpose. And Elohim saw that was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And so just as a reminder, the word for creation in Genesis 1, verse 1, the word bara is used for the original creation, where it says Elohim created. But here it is asa. He made, he appointed. And we saw that up here too. Let them be for signs and appointed feasts. And one thing that's so beautiful, I didn't mention this prior to the feast, but you can check this out. One thing that's really beautiful, if you're keeping the Feast of Tabernacles at the right time, and I realize that people keep the feast at the wrong time, but we don't judge them because they're trying. But there is a right and a wrong time. And God says that there are certain signs that you're going to see. One of the signs that you're going to see, where it talks about the sun to give light during the day and the moon to give light during the night, we know that the Feast of Tabernacles pictures the time when the light of the world, Yahshua the Messiah, when he's going to be reigning over all of the earth, right? So what do you think happens during the Feast of Tabernacles? There is light on the earth 24 hours in the day. So when the sun is about to set, and let's say that this is the horizon. The sun is about to set below the horizon, but before it does, what happens? The moon comes up. So there's both the sun and the moon on the earth at the same time. And when the moon is about to set, the sun has already come up. So there's also light on the earth at that time, at night and in the morning. So normally, like if you look probably now, you're going to see the sun goes down. The sun goes down. The sun goes below the horizon. And after it's below the horizon, the moon rises. So there's a period of darkness over the face of the earth because neither the sun nor the moon is actually shining on the earth. That's one of the signs that there's light on the earth 24 hours in a day when people are keeping the Feast of Tabernacles at the right time. Another thing that is just, we could say coincidence, but even the First Nations people of the United States, of what's called the Americas, but of this country where we live, they call the seventh month the harvest moon. Now, why do they call it the harvest moon? And it's always the seventh month. Why do they call it the harvest moon? Because before the sun sets, the moon has already risen, so there's no darkness at night. It means they can extend they're harvesting for a longer period of time. They can bring in that harvest. Now, what is the Feast of Tabernacles called also? It's called the Feast of Ingathering because people are gathering in the crops. Just like it was in Israel, the same was true here with the First Nations people, where they recognized the seventh month was the time when there was, before the sun went below the horizon, the moon had risen, so there was continuous light into the night, and they could still harvest their crops. So those are just a couple of things, and that was definitely the situation this past year. So Yahshua, the light of the world, pierced the darkness on the fourth day in the 4,000th year. So please follow me here. I said for the first 4,000 years, the light of the world was Yahweh, right? Now, how do we get that? Because for the first 4 days, there was the cosmic light that was on the earth. But on the fourth day, God made the sun and the moon to appear, right? He made the sun and the moon to appear on the fourth day. So think about this, because it is powerful. It is amazing. If you do the chronology of the Bible, and the Bible is the most accurate historical book there is, it's the most accurate astronomical book that there is, it's the most accurate geographic book that there is, it's the most accurate, I said historical book, scientific book, all of the sciences. All right, so when did Yahshua come to the earth? When was he born? Does anybody know? He was born on the fourth day, in the 4,000th year after Adam and Eve. So just like the sun and the moon appeared because God removed the clouds, and the sun and the moon appeared on the fourth day, in the 4,000th year, God removed the clouds of darkness in people's minds and made Yahshua to appear. Now, of course, he existed as Yahweh Elohim throughout eternity, but he was made to appear on the fourth day. That's when he was born. So in John chapter 1, this is John chapter 1 and verses 1 through 5. John chapter 1 and verses 1 through 5. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was with Elohim in the beginning, so he's always been the light of the world. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. We know for sure. In Revelation chapter 12, it pictures the dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, waiting to devour the woman who was ready to give birth. That was Yahshua. The reality in history is that King Herod wanted to kill all of the babies because he heard that the Messiah, the true King of Kings, was born. So we know that the darkness, which is sin, has not overcome the light. Herod, Satan, the devil, could not kill Yahshua because God wanted him to be alive. And now in John chapter 1, further down in verses 9 through 13, in John chapter 1, verses 9 through 13, the true light who gives light to every man and woman was coming into the world. When did he come into the world? This true light. On the fourth day, in the 4,000th year. Just like the light of the world existed throughout eternity, and for the first 4 days, it was that cosmic light over the earth, but the clouds were still there. You could tell it was day, but the clouds were still there. On the fourth day of renewal, God said, I'm going to remove the clouds and the sun and the moon are going to appear. Well, what happened on the fourth day in the 4,000th year of the creation since man? God said, Yahweh has always existed. But now, as Yahshua, I'm going to remove the clouds and he is going to appear. Now, he's the sun. Who is the moon? Let me hear you. Who said that? Christian? Say it loud. Say it loud. I'm a Christian and I'm proud. Who is it? The church. Did the church also appear in the fourth day? The sun appeared and the church appeared also on the fourth day. Beautiful picture. God is perfect. He is telling us from the beginning that Yahshua HaMashiach is in the TaNaK. Right from the beginning. It's the same one. Yahshua is the same as Yahweh, just in a different form. A lot of people believe that it was the Father who was the God of the Old Testament. And he was this mean old God that told people, you got to keep the commandments. And if you don't, I'm going to kick your butt. I'm going to kick you out the land. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to bring fire and everything. And then this beautiful baby Jesus who grew up to be this, I can't say it because I'm recording this, but this person with long hair that doesn't look like a man, doesn't act like a man, that he was this loving person. Oh, you don't have to keep the commandments because I will forgive you. And then even worse, you have some people who put Mary as the intercessor. You can't even go through this baby Jesus that grew up to be, like that. You can't go through him. You got to go through Mary. I mean, all kind of crap that people teach. But Yahshua is the same as Yahweh. It's just what happened. The Father said, and this is pictured when we do the foot washing, right? The Father said, get up off your throne, remove your glory, and go down to the earth as flesh. So when we're doing the foot washing, what do? We take off our socks, right? That's like taking off, well, first of all, we get up out of our chairs. That's like getting up off the throne. We're picturing Yahshua doing that. Then we take off our socks. We have our feet washed. Then what do? We put back on our socks. We get up out of our chair and we go back. Same thing. Yahshua gave up his glory. He died. And then what did he do? He was resurrected and he reascended to heaven. Perfect process during Passover and the foot washing. So he's the same person, Yahweh, who became flesh, the word who became flesh, same entity. So it says, the true light who gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own. And this should tell us something. If it's Yahshua and the whole world was made through him, you know he had to be Yahweh, because it says it was through Yahweh Elohim that the heavens and the earth were created. So same entity. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to all who did receive him and believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of Elohim, children born not of blood, nor of the desire or will of man, but born of Elohim. And right now we should say hallelujah and give him a shout of praise. I know some people might not be into the message like I am. Some of y'all look like you're dead, though. Let's give him a shout of praise. Yes. Woo! Yes. He is the one who says he gave us the right to become children of Elohim, children born not of blood, nor of the desire or will of man, but born of Elohim. That is beautiful. So in John chapter 8, verse 12, John chapter 8, verse 12, once again, Yahshua spoke to the people and said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Here we're going to rejoice. We're going to have life because we have life and life abundantly. So as long as I'm alive, we will rejoice, we will dance, we will sing, we will praise, we will clap our hands, we'll play on instruments, because we serve the living God. Out of the darkness came the light. This is chapter 1. Out of the darkness came the light. Yahshua HaMashiach is in the TaNaK right from the beginning. Genesis 1, verse 1, and all the way through.